Hello, my name is Monty Pearson, and I am a member of 350 Massachusetts. And this short video is a way of introducing you to ISO New England and the effect it has on our electric energy grid, and also the way in which that electric energy grid really affects our ability to transition to a renewable future to limit the damage that climate change is going to do to our environment. Now, when 350 Massachusetts works on statewide issues, the organization forms working groups, and these groups have members from all over the state who work together through Zoom meetings. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the working group that I have. It's called Clean the Grid. And we are working on two things. One is making sure that ISO New England changes its policies. And the second is to try to get utilities to encourage people to put solar power on their roofs, and utilities and towns and cities to encourage more solar power on their rooftops. So we do that by working in alliance with other environmental groups, by providing information to our members, and also providing the information to the general public. Now, let me start by giving you kind of a sense of the issue that we're dealing with, which is that for the last 800,000 years, which goes way, way beyond my grandparents, the Earth has oscillated between 200 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and 300 million. And that changes with a lot of different conditions on the planet. But what you'll see is that by 1950, that the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has gone way up. And it's just, you can see the chart goes back and forth here, but now the curve is just going straight up. And that means that we have now reached the part where we are at 419 parts CO2 per million in our atmosphere. Now, the last time that happened was 3.5 million years ago. And that was an interesting time in history. It was the mid-Pliocene era. And the oceans in those days was 78 feet higher than it is now. And animals such as these mastodons were kind of masters of the planet. So we are now in very dangerous CO2 range, where the planet is going to start heating up pretty rapidly. And we need to begin thinking about how to prevent that. And what we need to do is keep fossil fuels in the ground and quickly transition to 100% renewable energy. We need to start by cutting CO2 emissions in half by 2030, which is only 9 years from now. We need to put heat pumps in homes. We need to put drivers in electric cars. We need to build thousands of miles of electric commuter rail. And we need to replace fossil fuel power plants with renewable energy resources. And to operate all of these electric devices, we need to have an extreme transition from dirty power plants that are powered by coal, natural gas, and oil to solar and wind power almost completely as the parts that power our electric grid. Now, how do we go about doing that? Let me start here by looking at a map of the United States, and you'll see that the Federal Energy Deregulation Act in the 1990s created kind of a market system for electric energy. And the colored areas on this map are regional transmission agencies where more than one state has gotten together to create a market for electricity. And you'll see that for our purposes, New England is completely blue because we are in the area that is known as the Regional Transmission Organization for New England. And that area is managed by something called the Independent System Operator New England. And that's why we call it ISO New England. Now, it's an independent nonprofit entity and has a responsibility to manage all the electricity delivered to homes and businesses in New England. Now, because of deregulation, each section of the energy sector is divided up into different companies. There are companies that generate electricity, there are companies that transmit electricity, and there are companies that distribute electricity at the very end of the electric process to homes and businesses. Now, for example, National Grid and Eversource used to both transmit energy and generate energy. Now they only transmit energy and they bid against one another to cover various areas of the state. And ISO's role is to run this market. And its role is to administer rules for yearly competition to see who is going to be generating power and to see who is going to be transmitting power. And the two principles that ISO is supposed to be using while it does that is that energy reliability. And reliability is really very important. It means that anytime, day or night, that you flip on a switch, electricity is available for you. If you read stories about less developed countries in the world, you know that some of them have long periods of time when there isn't any electricity available because they just don't have enough generation power. So we have a lot of electric power, but in order to balance having enough electricity in the grid so every house is served whenever somebody uses electricity, you need to have pretty careful monitoring of that. The other and more pertinent for this discussion role is that they also plan for future capacity. That is that as electric power usage goes up with economic growth, the ISO puts out an RFP each year and says, 3 years from now, we believe we're going to need a certain amount of electric power. And we've got a base that we've got now, but we're going to add more onto it. And we want people to bid to see who can provide us with electricity that is both cheap and reliable. And that is the key roles that it has. But unfortunately, what we're seeing at this time of flux and climate change is that there's a third priority that ISO has, and that is to protect the profits of fossil fuel companies. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that ISO New England is generally biased against solar power and wind power. Now, why would that be? Well, ISO has directors and overseen by an advisory body called the New England Power Pool. And that pool is of people, is made up of stakeholders. You've heard that term, I guess. Stakeholders mean people who are in some way have concerns about the electric system. And the way stakeholders are set up is done in a way that biases the results. The stakeholder organization is called NEPOOL, the New England Power Pool, and major decisions by ISO has to be ratified by members of NEPOOL. But NEPOOL isn't a one person, one vote, or one organization, one vote, or anything like that. Instead, it has 6 groups, and all the members of each group come together and have just one vote. So that the 12 companies that generate electric power in New England have one vote, and the 5 utilities that generate electric power and transmit electric power have 5 votes, have 1 vote. There are only 5 of them, but they have 1 vote. And as you'll see, the 41 end user groups, which include organizations like the Sierra Club and the Attorney General's office of several New England states, they only have 1 vote altogether. So the 15 million people who live in New England have 1 vote in NEPOOL, and the 12 companies that generate electricity have 1 vote, and the 128 companies that supply the generation companies and the transmission companies, and so they're their customers, have a whole vote themselves. The publicly owned entities, which are municipal groups, also have just 1 vote, and alternative resource and providers have 1 vote. So you could see that there's sort of a 4-2 majority in favor of the traditional power companies that use fossil fuels or transmit fossil fuel electricity. And thus, ISO staff and management consists of lawyers and economists and engineers who are entirely oriented towards cost-effective management of the existing fossil fuel powered system. Now, what does that mean? Is that important, or what are the outcome of that? Well, what it means is, for example, in 2020, just last year, with Australia burning and other symptoms of climate change becoming very apparent, 52% of the electric energy used in New England came from natural gas power plants. And it's not really natural gas, of course. Most of it comes from pollution-ridden process known as fracking. So it's a very dirty process. They have pipelines that leak methane, which is another climate gas. And the climate is affected very negatively by this huge amount of natural gas that we are using for our power. Another 27% of our electric energy comes from nuclear power plants. And while these plants, of course, don't generate carbon pollution, they do provide a sort of a hazard for the people who live around them. So it's not ideal that we're dependent on all of these nuclear plants. Another problem is that these plants are all pretty old and are coming to the end of their useful life. And so the question is, how are they going to be replaced? Anyway, another 27% of our electricity comes from other, not 27%, another 20% or so comes from other sources. Just 4% of it comes from wind power, and only 3% of it comes from solar power. So this is a real problem. The electric grid in New England is primarily fueled by nuclear power and fossil fuels. So it's a contributor to climate change. Now, the Oregon ISO has set up this situation partly because it doesn't really figure in a lot of extra things other than what is the cost of fuel. It doesn't consider the damage to the climate created by global warming. It doesn't consider the damage to public health of having a lot of facilities in low-income neighborhoods. There's a bias against, there aren't fossil fuel power plants in Wellesley or Lexington, right? They're in Chelsea and they're in Weymouth and places where the population doesn't have the same kind of political power. And they also ISO has ignored the renewable energy goals set by state governments. Both Massachusetts and Connecticut and Vermont have set very stringent goals for the future for renewable energy, and ISO doesn't pay any attention to those concerns. In fact, ISO rules actually resist the entrance of renewable energy resources. For example, ISO continues to emphasize fuel secure resources, and that means that they keep open old power plants that use fossil fuels instead of bringing in new power sources from solar or wind power. And this is an example. This is a plant near Boston. It's located in the neighborhood Chelsea in North Boston, Charlestown, where that are both low-income neighborhoods, and it's right next to Somerville, which until recently was a low-income area. And they have given this power plant $400 million to stay open for 2 extra years, so they can use it as a plant to cover up when there are electricity demand goes way up and there's a need for extra power to be added to the grid. In addition, they have a specific way of keeping renewables from coming onto the market. And that is that when they ask for people to bid to produce electricity 3 years from now, they have rules that stack the deck against solar power and wind power that is encouraged or subsidized in any way by the state government. And then that means that in 2019, for example, they had a bidding process, and of the amount of electricity that they contracted for the year 2023, only 5% of that was solar or wind power. And all of the rest of it were fossil fuel or conservation kind of things. And the Massachusetts legislature has shown its unhappiness with ISO's priorities by keeping ISOs, forcing ISOs to add more wind power by directly contracting for the Cape Wind and other fossil fuel, not fossil fuel, but other wind power projects that are going on down on the Cape. Now, we have created an organization called Fix the Grid Campaign, which is attempting to pressure ISO to change its policies. And this is not just a matter of a radical environmental group in a tilting at windmills or wind turbines even. We have a lot of potential allies. For example, 5 of the 6 New England governors issued a white paper last fall saying that ISO is governed improperly, that ISO doesn't have a commitment to changing to renewable energy, and that ISO is not providing ways for the electric power grid to change, and that governors and legislatures have pointed the way for. The Massachusetts Attorney General's office has been consistently critical of ISO New England. And in fact, the governor's office actually has on their website right now a petition demanding that ISO change. So we have a number of potential allies. What we need to do is that political actors like governors and attorney generals have a lot of things on their plate. And it really helps to put something on the front burner if there is public pressure and public discussion of the problem of one or another problems. And so if we can generate enough activity and complaints and petitions and events, rallies, to bring this to the attention of governors and make them say, oh, we need to get going and make this happen, then that is an extremely valuable thing to do. So we have a set of reforms here. You can see them on the screen. I'm not going to bother you to read them to you. I assume that you can read them yourself. And these are the demands that we have made. They're general principles. We're not trying to manage the system in detail. We think that these sets of values should be guiding for anyone who is managing the electric grid. And we think that they should be followed on all decisions about electric energy now. And that campaign is taking place right now. It's called Fix the Grid Campaign, and it's going to be a whole bunch of events. One of them is going to be in November. We're going to have a rally in Holyoke, where ISO's office is. Fittingly, ISO's office is in a closed office park that is fenced off, given the fact that they don't really like to have a lot of public scrutiny of their work, but we're going to bring our complaints to them and have a rally where we tell them we want to have a clean New England future. If you want more information after you have watched this video, I suggest that you go to our website, the 350 Massachusetts Better Future Project.org. And what you'll see is in the drop-down menus, there's something for working groups. And go to the working groups things and then find Clean the Grid. And Clean the Grid working group is the group that I'm working with. And it has materials on its little section of our website that will give you more information about how ISO works and how you can get involved. It's a very important issue. Nobody knows about it, but it's an important part of our being able to respond to climate change. And I thank you for watching this video, and we appreciate your interest in this. Go to 350 Mass Better Future Project, look at this information, and if you need more information, give me an email and I will send you all kinds of information about how the system works and how we can make it better. Thank you very much.